Good afternoon et bonjour. My name is Jennifer Fillmore, and I'm the Director General for the House Center of Excellence Project. Thank you for being here today. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the lands of Indigenous people and their governments that make up this incredible region. We acknowledge that our workplaces are on the traditional and unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, the Innu Nation, and the Nunutchivut Inuit. We respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Indigenous people who have lived on these lands for over 15,000 years, lands that continue to be the home to a diverse Indigenous population and other peoples. I'm thrilled to be here today with the Honorable Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs, as well as our Public Safety Minister. With Ann Kelly as well, our Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada, and many of our valued employees and partners. I also want to welcome Andrew Black, the Mayor of Tantramar. En tant qu'ancienne directrice du pénitentiaire de Dorchester et résidente locale, je suis très fière de prendre part à la mise à jour sur le Centre d'excellence en santé. Au Service correctionnel du Canada, nous travaillons avec diligence et en collaboration avec Services publics et Approvisionnement Canada à l'avancement de ce projet crucial. Le nouveau Centre d'excellence en santé va enrichir les services de santé actuellement offerts au Centre de rétablissement Shepherd et va contribuer aux efforts continus que nous déployons afin d'améliorer les soins de santé dans le système correctionnel fédéral. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes heureux de faire le point sur les progrès réalisés dans le cadre de ce projet. Alors, j'invite maintenant le ministre LeBlanc à prendre la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to the Shepherd Healing Center in the Dorchester Penitentiary. I'm really happy to be here with somebody who's become a friend of mine and with whom I've really, really appreciated working over the last year and a half with your Commissioner, Ann Kelly, the Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada, Joanne, the Deputy Commissioner for the Atlantic region as well, and all of the team. Julie Bédard is here, the Director General for Shepherd, and the remarkable women and men who work with you, both here at Shepherd and in the Dorchester institution. We noted the presence of the Mayor of Tantramar. Andrew, thank you for being here. And Megan Mitton is also here, the MLA, the provincial member for the Tantramar region. Megan and I have talked about and worked on this project for a long time. So Megan, thank you for joining us. It's a very, I think, important moment for Canada, for the Correctional Service of Canada, but you can imagine the impact in the Tantramar community. Merci d'avoir pris le temps de vous déplacer pour être avec nous aujourd'hui. I want to begin by telling you what I said to the Prime Minister on Monday when he asked me to be Canada's Finance Minister. It sort of hit me, but wait a minute, I won't probably for a long time. Every corner of our country, the women and men who come to serve Canadians in the Correctional Service of Canada are remarkable people. Et les employés, comme les hauts dirigeants du Service correctionnel du Canada, sont des gens incroyables qui font un travail essentiel pour la sécurité de notre pays. And many of the women and men who work for the Correctional Service of Canada, comme il se doit, as is normal, work behind high fences. With a lot of razor wire, and it's unusual that you have a bunch of television cameras in a federal penitentiary. I sort of insisted that we find the right way to bring journalists here because I wanted you to see the facility that we're about to replace. But I wanted to say to the people from the Correctional Service who are here, your work inspires me. You're some of the unsung heroes of the public safety portfolio. Canadians, I've been very lucky to see the remarkable work you do every day, and I'll continue to tell your story to Canadians because they may not have the chance that I had to see the fantastic work that all of you do in Canada's Correctional Service. À chaque fois que j'ai eu l'occasion de visiter un établissement correctionnel fédéral, je profite pour l'occasion, comme je viens de dire en anglais, pour reconnaître et célébrer le Service correctionnel du Canada et ses employés pour le rôle essentiel qu'ils et elles jouent en matière de sécurité publique du Canada. Je viens d'ailleurs de passer 45 minutes à discuter avec les gens qui travaillent ici à Chapelly et au pénitencier de Dorchester. Et je suis toujours impressionné par leur dévouement et leurs compétences, ceux et celles qui œuvrent dans un milieu carcéral. Ce sont des emplois difficiles, mais extrêmement importants pour notre pays, et je leur serai toujours reconnaissant pour leur bienvenue, pour leur gentillesse et pour leur accueil. Over the past number of years, I've come here to Dorchester to talk to you about a project that is extremely important for me as your Member of Parliament, and that's, as we said a minute ago, the Health Centre of Excellence. It's in recognition of the incredible work that happens here in Dorchester and at places like this across the country, and I have been working with the Correctional Service of Canada as a Member of Parliament, as a Minister responsible for other departments, and more recently as Canada's Minister of Public Safety to make this facility a reality. Safely supervising and rehabilitating offenders is at the core of the work of the Correctional Service of Canada. It's sometimes dangerous, it's often demanding, and it's complex work. It's complex given the evolving needs of inmates, and every day these hard-working women and men take up the challenge of changing lives, and in so doing, protecting Canadians. The Health Centre of Excellence project will go far in supporting the remarkable women and men who work here in their important work for Canada. L'établissement vise à aider le service correctionnel à répondre aux besoins des délinquants en matière de soins de santé, y compris de santé mentale, ce qui est important pour réduire la récidive. Le Centre d'excellence en santé sera d'envergure nationale de 150 lits et offrira des services de santé bilingues aux délinquants, hommes et femmes, à travers le pays, y compris ceux en situation d'handicap et aux détenus âgés aussi. Et j'aimerais juste remercier une personne en particulier qui m'a inspiré à appuyer le projet de Chapelly, c'est le Dr Louis Thériault qui est avec nous. Louis est un de mes amis depuis longtemps, il travaille ici comme psychiatre avec son collègue le Dr Marc Vautour qui est ici. J'ai rencontré à travers Louis des personnes, ça remonte loin, à Luc Doucette qui était ici comme directeur général, avant Julie Bédard qui est ici, Marc Cormier. C'est des gens qui m'ont inspiré dans leur travail, dans leur enthousiasme à faire réaliser le projet, et je suis tellement content qu'ils sont avec nous aujourd'hui. From a local standpoint, and the mayor made a good pitch in the earlier meeting about working with the municipality on the cost of infrastructure. If you're building a very expensive state-of-the-art national facility here at Dorchester, we need partners. We need partners in the municipality of Tantramar, and we'll be working with Andrew and his team and his colleagues to ensure that we do it in the right way for the community, but also, very important to me as your Member of Parliament, this project will guarantee hundreds and hundreds of federal jobs. Your microphone's not working? Aha!
It's good.
You want me to start from scratch again? This project will guarantee hundreds and hundreds of well-paying jobs in the Tantramar region and southeastern New Brunswick for decades to come. So I'm pleased to announce today that the Treasury Board has approved 3 project proponents who have qualified to move forward in the next stage of the process. These national construction companies are Bird Design Build Construction, Inc., Ellis Don Corporation, and Pomelo Incorporated. In early January, the project team will begin working with these 3 proponents ahead of launching a formal request for proposal, the bidding process, in early February. The launch of the request for proposals is the last step before the government signs a binding contract to design and build and break ground on this transformative national facility. I look forward to coming back here in the coming weeks to announce the results of that process and begin what will be the formal process of designing and building this national facility. So people understand the scale of the federal investment. We're not allowed, because of government procurement rules, this will go out to a tendering process, obviously, but so you understand the scale of the project. The Treasury Board last week approved an investment which will be one of the largest investments the Government of Canada has made in New Brunswick since the Confederation Bridge was built. So think about that. You can Google the cost of the Confederation Bridge 25 or 30 years ago. The scale of this project is very much in that range. Because of the tendering process, that will determine the final cost. But this is a game changer for Tantramar, for southeastern New Brunswick, and for the Correctional Service of Canada across the country. This is the last step, as I said. The authorities were given last week at a Treasury Board meeting. The money is safely now in the account of the Correctional Service of Canada. You'll see that in the public accounts that will come out in the coming months. This is a big deal because my objective has been, it's taken too long to bring this project to fruition, but last week at a Treasury Board meeting in Ottawa, the final step was crossed, and now the Correctional Service of Canada with their colleagues in the Public Works Department are in a position to quickly proceed with the contracting authorities. I'm also pleased to highlight, and I'll finish with this, we're putting in place a public advisory group that will inform how the project will proceed ahead, the design of the project obviously being a critical part, but then ultimately the construction of the project. We're looking for a variety of individuals to participate in the public advisory group. I've made a commitment to the mayor that obviously municipal representatives have to be a key part of this. The employees here at Shepparton and in Dorchester at the penitentiary will obviously have a key role to play in that process as well. This will include people from the public, from the educational field, from the healthcare field, just to name examples. This group will open a dialogue, gather community feedback, and advise the Government of Canada on key aspects of this process. In addition, of course, our planned engagement will include Indigenous communities, and the CSC, the Correctional Service, will continue to engage with a broad range of people, obviously their own employees and residents in the surrounding community. The Health Centre of Excellence will be a modern facility, multi-level security, male and female inmates and patients can be treated here. It will strengthen the Correctional Service of Canada's overall capacity nationally to address the health needs of an increasingly complex population. When the health needs of these people are properly met, it creates a safer working environment for the people that come to work here every day, and it improves the offender's chance of being successfully reintegrated into society. The vast majority of people that receive a federal prison sentence return to the community, and as is appropriate. But these people need to go back with their health needs met in the best possible way, because that makes the community that the rest of us live in when we walk out of these doors in a short while safer and more secure. Il s'agit d'un investissement majeur qui profitera non seulement à la santé et à la sécurité des délinquants, mais aussi du personnel du Service correctionnel du Canada pendant des décennies, tout en créant des opportunités économiques et des emplois importants dans notre communauté. So with that, thank you very, very much. I understand that we may take some questions from journalists. That's the part of my day that I look forward to most of all. You can imagine I haven't done a lot of that in the last few days. So maybe we could get that started. And I'm sure all of the questions will be about this local facility. And none of you are going to look at your phones and read out a question that your colleagues in Ottawa or Toronto sent you.
Minister, do you think we could get a photo with senior officials before we start the media piece?
Or do you want to dispose of the press thing now and then take a photo? I'm in your hands.
Whatever your preference is.
Let's complete this very elegant part now, and then happy to take a photo if people can stay.
Minister, I'm wondering how this project will fit into the overall health care programs in federal penitentiaries. As you know, the Office of the Correctional Investigator has been very critical of health services in penitentiaries, as was the Senate report in 2021. They called the lack of access that inmates have to health deeply troubling. So I'm wondering how this new, I understand about 155-bed center, will figure into the overall health scene in federal prisons.
So, a very good question, and I hope it'll be the most significant step forward at correcting that deficit, which I think we all acknowledge exists, ever in the Correctional Service of Canada. So I had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Zinger in Ottawa last week. One of the things he talked to me about, I said I was coming here this week, talked about healthcare with him. You're right, colleagues in the Senate have also done work on this important aspect. It has been a challenge. I mean, look around. You're in a 140-year-old federal penitentiary. You're providing, some of the people standing behind you are providing healthcare services to some of the most complicated cases in the country in a clinical environment. If you think that psychiatrists are meeting their patients in some of the rooms off where we're standing, and Julie or others will correct me, we're standing in the common room for 45 people who, Julie, am I right? 20 here. 20 here, and there's one downstairs? So you're going to have 20 of the most complex cases. This is their common room that we're standing in. I'm told they don't all agree to watch CBC News Network during the day. There's one television. So you can see how this becomes unsafe for the people that work here. It's ineffective in terms of the treatment, the medical treatment that these offenders need, that these residents here need. So I think we acknowledge that this has been a challenge. It's a very expensive undertaking, but the fact that we'll have a state-of-the-art national center of excellence, bilingually offering services to a whole range of cases of patients, some of the most complex cases in the country will come here. So this is something that I didn't say, but what I've learned from some of my friends who are psychiatrists who work here, if you create sort of organically a national center of excellence in healthcare, predominantly mental health services, imagine the opportunities to train future psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses, social workers. So it will be for the community a huge benefit in raising our capacity to treat some of these health cases in the community as well. That'll be a positive spin-off by having this facility here. So this has been, for me, a pierre angulaire. It's been a key piece of addressing that, but we still have more work to do. So this isn't the final answer in terms of improving healthcare services. When I visit some of the regional healthcare facilities of the Correctional Service of Canada across the country, I see the challenges too. So here in Dorchester, it may be one of the more acute places that needs work quickly, but some of the other facilities will also need upgrading, and recruiting and retaining staff is also a big challenge.
Yeah, one follow-up on that. Most Canadians do not know that once you enter as an inmate in a federal prison, you're not covered by the Canada Health Act. You're covered by another act that empowers CSC to provide your medical care, requires them legally to do it. And that puts CSC in a conflict of interest because they have to worry about budget constraints and security and all the other issues. So would your government consider putting the inmates legally under the Canada Health Act provisions which guarantee universal access to Canadians?
So I don't know the answer to that. I haven't heard that question expressed that way. I'm not trying to be désagréable or disagreeable. I don't agree with the premise of the question that they're in a conflict of interest. They're no more in a conflict of interest than the Vitalité Health Authority is when somebody shows up in the emergency room of the Dumont Hospital in Moncton tonight. So I think we have an obligation to provide public health care. You're right, the Correctional Service of Canada, like the Canadian military, like the RCMP, serving members of the military are in a different position. But I would be open to that conversation. Commissioner Kelly is here as well. Maybe she could, after we're finished, if she might have a better insight into some of the precisions there. But I recognize we need to raise healthcare services across the Correctional Service of Canada. And if that idea would help, the provinces are very quick to point to the Government of Canada downloading healthcare services on them. They want more money and less patients. That's something that's been as old as Confederation or since we've had a public healthcare system in Canada. But my view is that the Correctional Service of Canada has to do the best job possible. That means facilities, professionals, people, staff, and it means access to the appropriate treatments. And the Government of Canada has to give them the funding to do that properly. And maybe that'll be a benefit of my becoming the finance minister. I said to Commissioner Kelly she should have brought her Christmas list to Moncton tonight, and the good news is apparently she has. D'autres questions?
Minister, I'm wondering if this is built in the meadow here beside the Dorchester Penitentiary, does that mean we're closing the door on the possible return of the farm, which used to run in the Westmoreland Institution before it was shut down in the Harper era, which many believe had so many benefits in terms of food security and rehabilitation and that sort of thing? What's the future of the potential return of that prison farm?
So I'm glad you asked that question. I too was very unhappy when the decision was made to close the prison farms. I visited at Westmoreland the Corcan staff and the Correctional Service of Canada staff and many of the inmates who were working there, and found out, for example, there's a waiting list of people who wanted to get up at 5 in the morning and work with the dairy herd. And we had some of the best dairy herd in the country in terms of the genetics of the herd. So that was, in my view, a bad decision to get rid of the prison farms. They sold off the herd, apparently. I have been asking the Correctional Service of Canada to tell me how we could, maybe on a different scale, bring back the prison farms. So today's decision or today's confirmation of the process to build the Health Center of Excellence in no way takes away from the merit of looking at whether we can get back into a prison farm context. It may be more appropriate here in Tantramar than in the center of some large city in the country where there are some correctional facilities as well. But I'm hoping that the government will be in a position to look at recreating, start small and start in places that lend themselves to that kind of work. And if you just look here, this would be a good place, in my view, to start. So that's a decision that I'm hoping we can get to soon, but it has in no way does Shepherd take away from the need, in my view, to look at that as well.
I will be asking a federal question.
Oh.
My apologies, but
I'm glad you apologize. Your colleagues don't always do that. You feel guilty that somebody texted you a question from Ottawa. We're Maritimes. That's right. You want to be nice. Yeah. So what did your colleagues, is it Ottawa that asked you, or?
I'm wondering,
I'm teasing.
and I mean, we all have this question. So does Trudeau have the full support of his cabinet to stay on as Prime Minister?
Yes.
Simple yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And as a follow-up, would you like the opportunity in the future to lead this country if you were given the chance?
So full points for trying with that question. If the Prime Minister has the full support of his cabinet, then why would we contemplate what happens after he decides to leave?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I have a similar question. Liberal backbenchers here in your home province want or have called for Prime Minister Trudeau to step down. What are your thoughts on that?
So I've answered that question in other fora as well. I respect the views of my colleagues. The New Brunswick MPs who've shared that view are friends of mine. They're people I respect. Some of them have been friends of mine for a couple of decades. If you think of a guy like Serge Cormier or René Arsenault that I've known for a long time, I recruited Jenica Atwin to the Liberal caucus. So I'm very proud of that. She's a terrific MP for Fredericton. That's a view they're expressing. The Prime Minister listened carefully when that view was expressed to him. Colleagues did what is the appropriate thing. They, in a caucus meeting, expressed those views directly to the Prime Minister himself. He listened. He, in some cases, responded to specific things that were raised. And he said he would reflect carefully on what he's heard. That's how the process works. That's the way these things are decided. And I'm confident that the government will remain focused on the work that Canadians want us to focus on. If we're potentially 5 weeks away from 25% tariffs applied across the board to Canadian exports to the United States, Canadians would understandably, I think, be impatient with a government that looks at itself all the time. We shouldn't be looking inward. We shouldn't be worrying about ourselves. The government got the confidence of the House of Commons 10 times last week. So the opposition parties that are all outraged, they need an election right away, they voted confidence in the government 10 times last week. So Parliament comes back on the 27th of January. Mr. Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. The work that the Prime Minister asked me to do as the Finance Minister with issues around border security is to work with the incoming administration, and I'll have meetings over the Christmas holidays with some key players in the incoming Trump administration. So that's the work that I'm focused on doing, and I think Canadians would be impatient if we spent an inordinate amount of time focusing on ourselves.
That was my follow-up, too, about President-elect Trump. What do you make of his comments on social media about Canada being the 51st state and Governor Trudeau? Does that irk you, and how are relations with the U.S. right now?
I was at the dinner at Mar-a-Lago 3 weeks ago. The President made those comments joking. And there was a cheerful banter. It was a private dinner. There was a cheerful banter between the Prime Minister. I even chirped in with something. This was a joke. He's gone on to say some of this stuff in social media. Again, our government's job is not to respond to everything that President Trump's going to post. He's quite active on social media. We again would be spending a lot of time focusing on his social media comments. What we're doing is focusing with him, but more importantly with people like Howard Lutnick, who will become the incoming Commerce Secretary responsible for the U.S. Trade Representative function. I had a call this week with a very positive preliminary call with Tom Homan, who President Trump has tapped to be the border czar, who's from upstate New York. He knows the northern border very well. We agreed to meet in the coming days after Christmas to talk about the package I announced, $1.3 billion on Tuesday around enhanced border security posture, the fight against fentanyl. So that's the work we're focused on. And your second, the last part of your question, I'm confident that we have a cordial, collaborative discussion with President Trump's incoming administration, but we have a lot of work to do. I don't underestimate for a minute the threat that those tariffs would mean to Canadian workers, to the Canadian economy. I also think, and we said this to Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago, it would also be negative for American consumers. If he won an election largely on the cost of living in the United States, this may not be the best way to answer that concern in the United States as well. But that's the work we need to continue to do. So far, I'm encouraged. We have an attentive ear. We have a cordial series of counterparts that want to work with us. But the work isn't finished, and we've got to work right up until January 20th, and then after he's inaugurated and he takes office with his incoming administration, we got to continue doing that work.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur le ministre. Moi, j'aimerais revenir un instant sur le Centre d'excellence en santé. Je m'entretenais ce matin avec un ex-directeur général qui me disait que l'un des problèmes dans sa forme actuelle, c'est qu'il y a des criminels qui ont commis des crimes assez graves, qui côtoient des gens qui ont essentiellement des problèmes de santé et qui ont commis des crimes mineurs. Est-ce que vous allez apporter une intention particulière à, disons, séparer ces deux groupes-là dans le nouveau centre?
C'est une très bonne question. Moi, je ne suis pas expert dans les catégories de sécurité que le service correctionnel donne aux délinquants. Je sais que quand quelqu'un... La seule chose, je ne veux pas être en désaccord avec votre question, mais de dire que c'est des crimes mineurs, normalement, quand on finit dans une institution carcérale fédérale, c'est rarement des crimes mineurs. Mais vous avez totalement raison, la population est variée. Il y a des personnes qui vont recevoir des soins ici qui ont commis des actes très violents, et il y a d'autres qui n'ont peut-être pas été dans ce genre de crime-là. Alors, je minimise pas du tout la différence entre certains patients, certains détenus. Moi, j'ai pleine confiance dans le service correctionnel, dans les professionnels de soins de santé qui travaillent ici, qui sont ici, dans le processus d'évaluation d'un délinquant. Quand quelqu'un, disons dans notre région, quand quelqu'un reçoit une peine fédérale, la personne s'en va, dans notre cas, c'est à Spring Hill, ça s'appelle une centre de réception. It's like the check-in quand vous recevez une peine fédérale. Et là, il y a des professionnels qui font un plan correctionnel basé sur des avis des psychologues, des travailleurs sociaux, il y a une évaluation médicale, c'est sûr. Alors, moi, j'ai pleine confiance qu'on pourra bien gérer cette population-là. Mais là, vous avez souligné exactement le défi. Regardez autour de nous. Si vous avez quelqu'un qui a commis un crime de meurtre extrêmement violent, puis il y en a pas loin d'où on est tout de suite là, ces gens-là reçoivent peut-être des traitements, comme vous dites, dans un contexte qu'on voit tout de suite aujourd'hui. Et le nouveau centre, avec 155 lits, purpose design, vraiment planifié pour prévenir ou prévaloir exactement ce genre de défi, va offrir des occasions cliniques beaucoup plus sécuritaires et pour les détenus, mais et pour le personnel qui travaille ici. Moi, je reconnais la complexité de ces évaluations-là. Je ne suis pas expert là-dedans. Je sais que le service correctionnel fait de son mieux avec les installations qu'ils et elles ont ici et dans d'autres centres à travers le pays. Mais il incombe au gouvernement de leur donner, pour les cas les plus complexes, un centre national bilingue, 155 lits, à haute sécurité, précisément pour bien gérer les différentes populations.
Puis dans un...
The good thing about being in a prison is you can't decide when you leave.
C'est ça.
If the questions get nasty, you'll spend the weekend here.
Fait que dans un tout autre ordre d'idée, je me demandais ce que vous pouviez nous dire concernant votre avenir politique et celui du premier ministre.
Alors, c'est un peu la question de votre collègue en anglais. Moi, je suis assez occupé avec le travail que j'ai tout de suite. Moi, je demeure focusé sur être le ministre des Finances, le ministre des Affaires intergouvernementales. Aujourd'hui, j'ai participé à une réunion du G7, des ministres des Finances et des gouverneurs des banques centrales. Hier, j'ai eu ma première discussion avec Tiff Macklem, le gouverneur de la Banque du Canada. Alors moi, je suis foncièrement tourné vers le travail que j'ai à faire. C'est un défi de taille. J'ai commencé la conversation avec le sous-ministre des Finances sur le processus de préparer le prochain budget que le gouvernement déposera au printemps devant le Parlement. Alors moi, je n'ai pas beaucoup de temps. J'aimerais faire de la motoneige si on a un peu de neige le temps des fêtes. J'ai acheté l'année passée un motoneige. Je vais m'amuser un peu pendant les fêtes et je vais me mettre au travail, mais je ne vais pas penser à des questions hypothétiques que je sais que vos collègues à Ottawa adorent poser comme questions, même localement. Mais moi, j'ai beaucoup de travail à faire et je ferai d'autres décisions en temps et lieu. Ce n'est pas du tout le cas pour le moment.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous.
Hi. Can you give us the story on Mark Carney? Is it over now?
I haven't had any conversations with Mark Carney myself. What I did say to a colleague of yours from Brunswick News, I think yesterday, is when the Prime Minister asked me to be the Finance Minister, he told me that I was going to be the Finance Minister in his government until the next election, that I was going to be the Finance Minister to present the next budget, and 2025 will be an election year. So that's the work that I'm doing. And again, I wasn't part of any conversations with Mr. Carney, but Mr. Carney isn't about to become Canada's finance minister in the short term. The Prime Minister asked me to start that work and to get ready for a budget in the spring.
And what advice would you give the Prime Minister to reset the government with a new cabinet?
Again, that's the prerogative of the Prime Minister. I may or may not have a conversation if he asks me views on some colleagues. Sometimes he has, sometimes he hasn't. Those are private conversations. If a member of Parliament or a minister talks publicly about those conversations, normally you wouldn't be part of that cabinet for long. And I really like the job I have, and I haven't finished, so I'm going to say that that should be decided by the Prime Minister, and I have full confidence in his judgment.
Minister, you've described this as the largest investment since the Confederation Bridge. The Science Centre was previously described as that at around $600 million. Why is the cost presumably now above $600 million for this centre?
And it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it. I want to be careful because, as I say, that there is an amount of money in the government. Now I'll sound like your finance minister. There's an amount of money in the government's fiscal framework to pay for this National Centre of Excellence. The costs have increased when we first started talking about this project, and because of some of the preliminary design work that was done, the costs have gone up considerably. So that $600 million figure would no longer represent the best estimate that the Public Works Department and the Correctional Service have in terms of the costs. We have an amount of money that is very significant that's been put aside for the Correctional Service of Canada to undertake the project. But ultimately, because we want to maximize value for taxpayers' money, there'll be a very detailed plan, design, engineering, architectural plan, and we'll ask those three national construction companies to submit a bid. If we're lucky, the bid will come in less than the amount of money we expect. That's the best value we can have for taxpayers. But if we use specific numbers in terms of what we think it'll cost, chances are the bids won't come in below that number.
Thank you.
Right. That's all the time we have, folks. Thank you very much.
Do you have one last
Merci.
question?
Yeah, we can take just one.
Okay.
That'd be nice, the local newspaper, sure.
So I was wondering if you anticipate any more delays on this project. I know that there's been some in the past. I was wondering what those were and if you expect there to be any in the future for this project.
Again, thank you for that question. This project has taken longer than I would have liked. It's taken longer than the Correctional Service of Canada would have liked. And it's taken longer than a lot of the people who work here every day would have liked. So I recognize that. That was caused by a series of factors. The global pandemic didn't help. Access to some of the experts who can do the preliminary design work was a bit complicated. The good news is that work has been done. The Treasury Board contracting process requires different options to be evaluated. So there were studies done about whether this facility should be located in another province. Should it be in the downtown of a city? Should it be that process is over. The decision is to build it right here behind us. And the government now has allocated the money to the Correctional Service of Canada, and the contracting process will start in the next couple of weeks. And in order to not have more delays, so that, again, I'm learning these bureaucratic terms as we go, but pre-qualified bidders. So to have the Public Services and Procurement Department work with the Correctional Service of Canada to approve 3 big national construction companies as pre-qualified bidders means that we don't just put out on the website this big new shiny multi-level correctional facility in Dorchester, New Brunswick, and ask people to come and tell us how they would do it. These 3 national companies will work on the design phase of the project, and they will qualify, they're qualified to submit an actual tender, which is the binding legal process. They'll have to put an amount of money, and then if they win the contract, they'll be obligated to build it for that cost. So I hope the delays are behind us. There'll be no more delays because the money isn't allocated, because the Correctional Service of Canada doesn't have it in its bank account. And the contracting process, we've actually put adrenaline into it. So we could have given a contract to just design the project and then waited and looked at that and then given a contract to build it. But you can see again, the design build contract means that if all of the steps are met, we can design it and build it as part of the same process. That just cuts months and months, if not years, from the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Now, Jen, we're going to do the photo.
Yeah, we're going to do the photo.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah, I'll just ask the